welcome to the last board in 2012 of NHS Direct NHS Trust. We have apologies from Keith Gate, who's still unwell, sadly, and we have Trisha Hamilton on the phone, I believe. Trisha, are you there?
Yes, morning, Joanne.
Morning, Trisha. Great, so if you wouldn't mind muting yourself, Trisha, and obviously unmuting whenever you want to contribute. I won't remember to ask you, so you'll have to butt in, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Which I hope you will. So, we have an important meeting today. This is to remind everybody, this is the Integrated Corporate Board, which now only lasts for an hour. That will be a challenge for me. We're trying to get the public business done in half an hour. We're live online, so if anybody's with us online, maybe they could fill in an evaluation form so that we can continuously improve the online experience. Thank you for that. And I have not had any declarations of interest in relation to anything on the agenda today. No more to take? Okay, that's fine. Let's then just move to the minutes of the last board, which was on the 26th of November. Are there any matters of accuracy? No? Okay, another good set of accurate minutes. And Nick, would you mind taking us through the action log, which is item 4?
Yes, I believe that Jill has provided some information. Is there anything further you want to add to that, Jill? It says an update will be provided to the board, but I don't know if there is anything further to say.
This is about roster efficiency.
Roster efficiency.
No, other than it has been flatlined at 88% against a 90% target for the past 3 months.
Okay. Right.
So it's very close.
Very close.
Very close.
Thank you. All right. Well, let's then move on to the performance section of the agenda, which, as usual, begins with your Chief Executive's report.
Okay. Well, as board members will know, and as everybody who works for NHS Direct knows, as it's formed part of our open forum discussions, the NHS Commissioning Board confirmed their decision to continue to commission a complex health and medicines information service, digital services including a click for nurse assessment service, and a dental service for various periods, 1 year and 2 years, and that's helpful and timely that decision has been made, as we can now factor that into the staffing plans going forward. We aim to get to an agreement, heads of terms with the department very shortly, in order that we can fix the final number of posts, frontline and then support, that these additional services will support. We're not quite there yet, but we'll shortly hope to get there. So just wanted to flag that.
That was very good news, obviously.
It is extremely good news.
Well done. Yes. Very good.
Yeah. And the second one, NHS Direct's website won a further award, as you can see, beating off competition from some worthy contenders. Also, it's good news. Okay. Excellent.
Okay.
That's it. Fantastic.
So, are there any questions? We obviously have a major agenda item coming up on the staff consultation. So, other than which we're going to have a long conversation about, other than that, are there any particular questions for Nick at this stage? No? Okay. Then let's move on to the corporate performance pack. Now, as usual for this time of the year, that came separately dispatched because, as people will know, this meeting is slightly earlier in the month than we normally have it because of the calendar year ending Christmas. So here's, I've got my copy of the full performance pack. I'm sure everybody else has had an opportunity to look at theirs. Trevor, would you like to introduce it?
Yes, happy to, Chair. Overall volumes across the service remain slightly below planned levels. There was a slight deterioration, but a marginal deterioration in performance, as reported last month, through the numbers of staff that we're now putting through training, and that has impacted on our fulfilment of the capacity plan. The other major issue to report is our continued work around warm transfer times for 111 services. Happy to take any questions on the report.
Yes. Are there any questions on the performance? Trevor?
I mean, first of all, I would like to comment how impressed I am with performance at a difficult time of the year, the start of a difficult time of the year, and at a point where the organisation is going through major change. My question really is to get a feel whether we think we can, or how we'll cope with the busy Christmas period. Obviously, A&E departments are under significant pressure at the moment. We've been reading in the national press. And sort of how will NHS Direct cope, and can we help our colleagues in the wider NHS through this period?
Can I just report on further discussions that we had with our National Commissioner, and then I'll perhaps ask Jackie and Jill just to chime in together with Tricia on the phone, which is, as we know, NHS Direct is converting, with the support of our Commissioner, to deliver assessments through NHS Pathways. And the process inevitably will bring about a change in the face-to-face referrals. And what we've agreed to do over the period from today through to the 5th of January is to divert additional nurse assessment time to reduce as much as we possibly can any unnecessary referrals to A&E. This is with the full support of our Commissioner in order that we take pressure off during that particularly busy holiday time. It will inevitably continue to put pressure on GP out of our services, and during January, February and March the conversion to Pathways will be completed, and then the NHS will move to the configuration that's been commissioned through the 111 services in terms of the assessment processes. So that is the position. We're making particular additional moves over Christmas to, as much as we can, reduce the A&E referrals, and 999 I should say. But we expect that during January, February and March it will continue to move in the other direction.
So I just wanted to add there, I think we've had some very productive conversations with the Commissioner, and we should note, I think that how, I mean, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but my impression is that there's been an intelligent engagement on the issues that we jointly face.
Certainly our Commissioner has been and remains challenging in terms of ensuring that we meet their expectations, and I think I can report that broadly that we are doing that, and certainly the line of travel, the direction of travel is an entirely understood, expected and agreed direction of travel in terms of conversion to Pathways.
Good.
I don't know if Jackie.
I think you answered it all, actually.
Thanks, Jackie. Tim.
Thanks, Joanne. On page 9 of 11, I think this is related to what we've just been talking about, actually. If we look at the fulfilment of the capacity plan chart, which is the second chart, and you can see the dip in over the Christmas period, but also in March, which is Easter time, we see the projected health and nurse advisors going above plan. I didn't quite understand how we can.
That's an artifact of the fact that by the time we get to Easter, the 0845 service will have been.
I don't think it's going to look like that.
No. So what it means is that we're well able to meet the small requirement for 0845 because in theory it only at that stage includes Leicestershire and Rutland, Torbay, Plymouth and Devon, 4% of England,
right.
And therefore one's ability to fulfil that is
so I'll write a line on it and say not national.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Peter.
Yeah, I agree with Trevor. I think the resilience of the organisation is fantastic as it stands at the moment. What I was just struggling with, because I don't think it does us a lot of favours, is this back table. I always look at this back table with the greens and the reds, and why don't we have a yellow? Why is it always green or red? I just don't
Well, we're
get
very
that.
black and white, or
Yeah,
red
but,
and green,
but-
as you
but
might say.
you see what I mean? It actually is so stark.
Yes.
You're saying marginal, and I mean, I take your point, but you just look along the line, it looks terrible. Just
It focuses our minds.
It is a lift from the from the SHA dashboard,
But-
and it's a pass failure across those codes.
but it needs to come with a commentary or narrative to understand, you know, I mean, I understand pass or fail, fine. But in our rest of our stuff, we've got an in-between figure. So, I mean, anyway, it just struck me as being...
I said our commissioner is challenging. That's their job.
Yes, but other than that, and also just on continuing, because Roger has always had a bad time on sickness. I know Steve usually makes this point, but I do feel that it's important to recognise the continuing improvement in that area again during a very difficult period. All credit to the management.
Absolutely,
And the staff.
our staff
And
and
the
managers
staff.
are doing fantastically well to keep.
And the staff. I mean, the staff are responding. so
Indeed,
well.
absolutely, yeah.
Could you just clarify that for me, Roger? Because I was also looking at that and was having a slight struggle, and it's probably me just not understanding the consistency between the comment on the front sheet and the graph on page 8. So on the front sheet, I think it says that 6 is coming down.
Yes.
And on B24 at the bottom of page 8, that doesn't quite look like what's happening.
Which one are you on?
Page 8.
Yeah.
Oh, that one, yeah.
8 and 9 actually.
It was the total, wasn't it? It was the total sickness you've got here.
Do you mean there's the
blue
blue
and
bars?
It looks like
Becoming
it's slightly
a-
higher. It does look like it's
But
slightly higher.
it's all relative to which period you're...
Okay, so that's the
So
time.
relative to this time last year, it's substantially lower.
That's what I...
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas the front sheet, I think, says it is coming down. Which is, anyway, okay. We're still
Yes, it
um,
does.
pleased with where it is relative to where it has been.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tim.
Just a very small point on page 10 under the corporate effectiveness and efficiency, perhaps it's the use of English. If we've come in as 1.09% below financial balance as expected, do we not mean that the expenditure was greater than plan rather than below plan, or is that a technical term? Because presumably you want to add up the 0.06 and 0.03. Yeah. So it's 1 million over plan.
We're 1 million. Our actual performance is 1 million over plan. Our actual position is 1 million, but it's on plan. So it's around the wording of that, which we'll refine.
There's 0.03 million above plan, is what I was looking at, I think. And that was spent more than we expected.
Or received less than we expected.
And received less than we
The
expected.
3 bullets are
And you put the two
Yeah.
together.
The 3 bullets are
Yes.
inconsistent.
Yes, and you put
We
the
will
two
correct
together.
that.
Above and belows.
Do
Yeah.
apologise.
Okay.
So that was above.
And then just to continue on the wording theme, because we're having such fun, the graph on page 4, time to answer within 60 seconds. That's actually not what the graph shows, is it? The graph doesn't show time to answer. The graph shows the proportion of calls which were answered within target.
Correct.
That's correct.
So we should retitle that graph, and when we say on the bullet 111 time to answer has been above the target, what we mean is proportion answered within the deadline has
Within
been
the
above
standard,
the target.
Yes.
Okay. I have one more, I'm afraid, which is query on the graph on the bottom of page 3. This is, I think Trish might want to come in here. So it looks as though, looking back, around March, April time, 2 things were happening. One, we took our target down, and I remember having a discussion about that, and that was reasonable. And at the same time, our scoring shot up. That crossover looks, on the face of it, slightly odd. The question, and maybe I've forgotten something crucial there. Did we also change our scoring mechanism at the same time as we brought the target down? What accounts for the blue line shooting up? the blue bars. Tricia?
Are you with us, Tricia? Yeah.
Yeah, I am with you. We actually, running up to March, was struggling meeting the target. So we did do the revisions you've just described, Joanne, and you now see a cross of revising the target and having a more focus on actually getting the core reviews undertaken.
But my question is, what accounts for the jump in the actual scoring between March and April, which was then sustained from April onwards? So why were the calls which were reviewed, why did the scoring go up? Did we change the scoring system?
We actually started to give more feedback to our staff, so we can actually now see the improvements of the feedback staff have received from the core review, now starting to filter through the actual core review process.
So what you're saying is we didn't change the bar, we didn't move the bar, we just actually have seen a real improvement in the quality of calls between March and April.
Yes, I believe so.
It looks dramatic. Louisa's.
I was just going to say that. I mean, if you can get quality improvement, can you do that quickly?
Frankly, it looks odd, Tricia, because it looks as if in one step we stepped up our performance and held it there. I think we should just perhaps look at that.
Yeah, there was a point at which we switched to use the RCGP audit tool, isn't there?
That's correct. Yeah.
When did we do that?
We did that back in the March. So we changed the actual audit tool process. So we now reflect the RCGP tool. We also changed the way in which we review all of our staff. So we used to count the totality as a percentage of staff reviewed. Now we count the number of core reviews per person. So we count the percentage of 1 call, 2 or 3 calls per individual. And then the scoring mechanism of pass or fail was also reviewed.
Okay. I think we probably just need a footnote.
We'll do a written note.
Yeah, that would be good.
I'll do that.
Okay. That's very helpful. Any other questions? No? Would you like just to speak briefly about finance, Trevor?
Yeah, we have a deficit for the year to date of a little under £1 million. It's an improvement from prior months. It remains in line with our profile target for the year to date. We continue to work very closely and meet regularly with our Department of Health colleagues and audit colleagues to agree the accounting treatment of some of the less routine items that we expect to bring into account later in the year, but we remain on plan and on target.
Thank you. That's very pleasing to note. Are there any questions, Peter?
Just, they're very tidy as always. Just on 2.3, this rebasing, which I think probably Joanne, this is what you were referring to, was it, in terms of this negotiation around the core volumes, which is that what you were alluding to earlier?
I was alluding to something, I think, slightly later than that in the process. But I mean, it has been an ongoing process.
So I thought this was really a good
dialogue,
really useful and good idea to ensure that we don't. There's no misunderstanding in the public sort of facing part of the organisation in what we're trying to do around the next few months. I just. Do you want to say anything more about it? Because I thought it was really helpful that we've managed to get this done.
Well, it was around the discussions we had with them about how we could accommodate the movement from 0845 services to 111 and to make sure that the service was protected and safeguarding and putting us in the best possible position to continue to maintain the quality and standards of 0845 and mobilise 111. So it was a general principle behind it, and I think we've reached a very positive outcome with our commissioners, who have been extremely supportive.
So there will be some dips in volumes potentially, or there might be, so that this is just ensuring that there's not trouble about these what I'll call insignificant variations that might occur during the training and the development of people to take on wider 111 service, which is good, very good.
And achieved with a lot of work on our side.
And this was always part of the original contract agreement that we had in place with them, that in year we would work to assess the potential in-year impacts.
Yeah. But it's getting it done, which was the key. Very good.
Thank you. The next paragraph, 2.4, looking at the KPI penalties, they sort of jumped up in November relative to last year, and above the running average. I guess that's a flat line average, isn't it? Is there anything in particular that caused that?
Comes back to the schedule that we had in the performance report.
Okay.
So where you can see those lines of where the red lines have increased, that's where there are penalties associated with those.
So I shouldn't. Right, fine.
Just in the commercial world, you would have an opportunity to negotiate. If you were really around that cusp, it wouldn't be quite like that. It really wouldn't. So I know from my own experience with other contracts that are in public sector, there are improvement plans put into place, or an understanding that will be much better later on. I mean, there's lots of variations on this theme. That's why my point about amber is an interesting one, I think.
Continues to be, as Nick keeps reminding us, our commissioners continue to be appropriately tough with us.
Wow.
And that dialogue continues. But I don't think we've got to a bad place.
No, absolutely not.
Okay, thank you very much, Trevor. That's great. Then we should move on. If there aren't any more questions, we should move on to the next section of the agenda, which we call governance and compliance, for, in a sense, the most significant item on the agenda today, which is the update on the staff consultation process. So, I know, Roger, you'll introduce it. I think, Nick, you might want to say a couple of things. I don't know which order you want to.
Well, first, I just wanted to welcome Sue Green and David Forey in the audience here as members of the National Staff side, with whom we will continue to work extremely closely, irrespective of the fact that on some issues we will not necessarily have the same perspective. But it's good to see you here today, and I know it's part of your regular trips to Leman Street, along with other members of the staff side, for regular discussions with us. So just wanted to welcome you. Clearly, we've been through the process of, as members of the executive team and with non-executive support, going out to meet many hundreds of our staff over the last 2 weeks to go through the big issues relating to the consultation, and I think generally that has been an extremely positive process, and one that I've certainly valued. Roger has pulled together a quick, or a brief I should say, a brief summary of where we've got to, and has included for the public record the consultation document. I don't know if there's any more you want to say by the intro.
Not really, Nick. No, you've got the consultation document now. There were a few amendments following the meeting we had on the 26th of November. So this is the document that went onto the intranet at 9 o'clock on the 3rd of December and is the basis of the consultation. As Nick says, we've now completed the open forums, which effectively were the face-to-face launch of the consultation, and we've got our third collective consultation group meeting. That's the meeting between management and staff side today, so they're in place, terms of reference agreed and so on, and we're working through that, and we're working over Christmas on that as well. So we're continuing to work weekly with staff side colleagues there. For those of you who have been to the open forums, they have been very lively, very engaged, very challenging, and as you will see from the consultation document, we do not have all the information we need for our employees yet, and that I think is what they're hungry for more than anything. They really, because of the work that's been done up until the point of consultation, I don't think the basis of the consultation came to a surprise to anybody at all. And so we very quickly have got into the detailed mechanics of the processes, and that's where really our colleagues need more information. So no surprises about what's happening. Very happy about the decision about other services, but which of course came only 4 days before the consultation was launched, but now hungry for more information.
Thanks, Roger. So I'd like to do a couple of things. I'd like to talk briefly about a dossier that I've just been given, and I would like to bring forward from our agenda. In our engage stakeholder activity part of the agenda, we normally invite feedback from non-executives and executives of about engagement they've had with staff over the prior month. Because most of that is open forum and consultation related, I'd like to take that now. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention this weighty dossier which Sue and Dave gave me before the meeting, which is a compilation of the emails that they've received from our staff responding to issues within the consultation, particularly the regrading. I haven't had an opportunity to read it all yet, but I've had a skim through, and it's a very welcome input to the consultation, because it elucidates some of the important issues. And I think one of the things that stands out very clearly is the distress that many staff feel about the regrading of the roles. And I think it's really important that we recognise that, and that we do our best to keep explaining why it is that these jobs have been evaluated at the bands they have, and it is about the jobs, not the individuals, and that's a very difficult thing to get across, and it's a difficult thing for staff to hear. And I want to say thank you to everybody, all the staff who've written through the staff side and contributed their thoughts to this, and recognising that they have managed. Thank you for inviting them to put their points of view politely, which was a nice thing to do. They have done that, but in a polite way, really express the strength of their feelings. So thanks for that. So for us both execs and non-execs who've been out there at open forums, would anybody like to feedback how those have been going and what your impressions are from those? Anybody like to go?
I'll start if you wish. I was at Nottingham on last Tuesday and Wakefield on Saturday. I thought the pack that was presented, I know there's some stuff missing, but we couldn't have had that information. So I thought the pack was pretty good and pretty clear. I think that we had a very, very objective, sometimes solemn, but very objective reaction actually, and it was pretty constructive, all the questions that I think that we saw. So I think we're grateful for the staff, and I think as an executive, the amount of time that we put in back in June with the consultation, that I think we were getting the return on that investment. It was very time consuming back in June to do all those consultations, but it really wasn't a surprise, so the engagement was pretty good. So I think it was a very worthwhile exercise, well conducted. We need to follow up. I know we will, Roger. We need to follow up with the missing bits of information as quickly as we can now. So I thought it was conducted really well. Good.
I guess that's pretty consistent across the piece. I don't know if anybody has anything different to it. I was in Milton Keynes on the first day, on the 3rd of December, by which stage people really had a very short time to assimilate the letters that they'd received in the consultation document. And I was also very impressed by the sort of thoughtfulness of the comments and questions, and the sort of mature attitude that staff were taking to a really difficult situation. Nick?
I've just thrown a few. The old phrase, "where you stand depends upon where you sit." So very, very much different issues coming out in different places. So the issues for folks that work in Hull are very different from the issues for staff who work in Exeter, where one agenda in one place might be about the complexities of transferring frontline staff to other one-on-one providers, very different issues than for places where some people may be transferring to other providers, but also a large proportion of people will be remaining with NHS Direct and transferring to work in the one-on-one service. So I think actually quite a complex picture. Secondly, really quite difficult for everybody to get their heads around the pooling of and the hierarchy of filling jobs, and quite what the rules are. And I think people really looking forward to having meaningful one-to-one conversations when the job numbers are available, so that everyone can actually see what it means for them in their circumstances. So I think it was very good context. As someone said, lots of engagement, lots of really good questions. conducted in a very good spirit. You know, we know this is challenging. Everybody knows it's challenging, but getting a lot of you know, real engagement in. So how do we make the best of this, and how do we move forward? So
Thanks.
I just feel sorry for the people who had the 12th presentation from me, because my energy levels are beginning to sap at that stage. It was all right, apparently.
Amber, that is, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Well, we'll obviously have further discussions as the feedback from the consultation comes in and the final information starts becoming available. All right. Let's stay with the governance section. Oh, please.
A question about the dossier that you've got.
Yes.
So then can we sort of...
Yes, I think we just need to work out how to share that in a practical way, because as you see, it's relatively chunky. Let's find a way of making that available to people. Thanks, Lisa. Okay, so we're still...
Chair.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, Steve.
So, I mean, it's not surprising that one of the major issues is around the regrading. Were there any other major issues that arose that you could perhaps...
That's the one that's jumped out at me from the dossier. I think that was a specific question that was asked. So there were many other questions.
Selection criteria for different jobs, travel to work rules or policies. When is it reasonable for me to be expected to travel to this site or to that site? We shouldn't forget, of course, that for the majority of our frontline staff, the issues are about their transfer to other organisations, not necessarily within NHS Direct. So that the banding issue which has been raised is not necessarily the most important, because actually it relates to banding is in relation to where they're going rather than what NHS Direct is doing. So I think those are the
a lot of questions about homeworking and how we're going to organise homeworking with existing home workers, potential new home workers. So a lot about how the rules are going to work with homeworking. So we need to work through some of that quite well.
And also the detail of other services. So how is the dental service, the health information service going to work? And those sorts of questions as well.
I was very struck by the fact that a number of the key people who we are calling upon to support this whole process, like HR, are still not clear about what the back office are caught within the back office area, which has not been as had an opportunity to articulate that as clearly as the front line. So that's a really important issue for people. All right. Then let's move on to the next agenda item, which is still in the governance and compliance section of the meeting, the corporate risk register. Sarah, there you are.
The executives have reviewed and updated the corporate risk register, and there is currently one red risk on the public section of the register, and that's the risk around the pathways training. Now, this risk is actually going to be closed and taken off the risk register, as the 16th of December was yesterday. We're now going to manage this activity through the project team, which will report into Nick's existing services subgroup meeting on a weekly basis.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on the risk register? No? Okay. So then we're into minutes and feedback from various committees. First of all, the Clinical Governance Committee of the 9th of November. So you talked about it already. Yeah. So the November meeting. So now we just have the minutes, and if there are any questions on those for Sue, they're in the pack as an accurate record, really. All right. So then there's feedback from the future NHS Direct subcommittee, which we held after the last board on the 26th of November. Trevor, I don't know if you have any particular highlights you'd like to share.
Well, the main business of the meeting was to cover our performance on 111 pilots, the mobilisation towards the new services we're providing, the settlement agreement of contracts associated with those services, and our risks that we're running across the service, and our risk management. It also included a detailed update around the retained services, which was an interesting presentation.
So those minutes, I'm sorry, we're slightly behind on those, which I think is my fault. So the minutes will come next time around, but if there are any questions, we're happy to take them. No? So the existing subcommittee, the existing services and transition and decommissioning subcommittee has put us in the shade by getting its minutes sorted. Trevor, did you have anything you wanted to add to your minutes, or anything you wanted to
just a
emphasise?
couple of points I think it's worth emphasising. We split our agenda into two halves. We look at existing service, performance and governance issues, and we look at the transition programme. As far as existing services are concerned, I think it is worth the board being aware that obviously at the moment Keith Gate is ill, so we have Jackie and Jill on my left covering the Chief Operating Officer post. And I think the committee is impressed with how well they are managing the performance and governance of the organisation at the moment. It feels very tight and sort of well under control. The big issue I think we're handling at the last meeting and are still handling, is the need to balance the task of ensuring that staff are prepared for 111 while still maintaining a high quality service under 0845. And I think we've already discussed that. We've already discussed the steps that are in hand to ensure that we help the wider NHS over Christmas while still trying to do that task. We continue to look in detail at patient experience, and we'll come on to that in a later agenda. You'll notice under item 8 of the minute we cover that. As far as the transition part of the agenda is concerned, there are very, very detailed plans in place to ensure that transition is well managed. At each meeting we receive reports on the key issues that should have been delivered by that meeting date, and I'm pleased to say at the last meeting everything that should have been delivered had been delivered, and it feels as though again we're in tight control of the transition process, so the board I think can be assured of that.
Thanks very much, Trevor. Are there any questions to the committee? No, okay. Well, that's nice, because then we can go move straight into the stakeholder section of the agenda, and having already taken some feedback from board members about the engagement with staff, this agenda section is now just focused on the existing services transition and decommissioning subcommittee's review of a number of 4 calls, so 2 patient experiences on feverish illness in children under 5. So just to remind people, this is where in this case the subcommittee has encrypted CDs of call recordings where the callers have given us permission to listen to those. We go through a process of listening, thinking about them, discussing the contents, and so that process was gone through last time around by the existing services subcommittee, and as Trevor mentioned in their minutes, item 8 describes or summarises the conversation. I don't know if anybody else, and I think it would be good if a member of the committee would be prepared just to talk a little bit more about what you thought about those calls and the experience of the patients and their parents, in this case their mothers, of the service that we provided. Jackie.
Thank you, Joan. I think these were really 2 examples of excellent calls and remind us why we're here and how we do make a difference to people sat at home who are wondering what else to do and to save a trip off to perhaps to see the GP or to A&E. And both of these calls, it was highly appropriate for 2 mums to phone up to seek advice for their youngsters, both of whom were concerned as to what they should do or what they could do. One of the calls also involved some changing of demographics of one of the mums who had used the service previously, and it was an excellent demonstration of how seamlessly that's done and how records are kept up to date and maintained. So really good.
I agree, that was good. The other thing that was particularly nice was some of the interaction between the second health advisor was particularly lovely, and the second nurse had a very nice interaction with the mother also. We haven't discussed this in the Future Services Subcommittee, but Tim?
I just observed that whilst I was at Newcastle yesterday, between sessions I sat in with a health advisor, had the identical call, and it was just as good. So they're not, they weren't selected out as for excellence necessarily. I thought what I heard in Newcastle was absolutely in keeping with what I heard on the call recordings.
That's great. So Louisa, then Trevor.
I thought there were some lovely things about the calls, and I think the sort of the the sort of the warmth and the concern, I think, is incredibly sort of reassuring. I am sometimes struck by it seems to take quite a long time to get somewhere, and that there is repetition.
I agree.
Quite a lot of repetition. And one of the things in the call where in the second call with the child that there was concern about whether or not he was fitting, it seemed that from the moment the health advisor asked somebody which way she should go, we turned to each other and said, what's going to happen to this call? And we said it's going to go to a clinician. And that would have saved, if there could have been a break-off somewhere in that algorithm, it would have saved 5 minutes of her going to a clinician. So I think there's more to commend these calls than to, but if we're looking at these calls in a strategic way, which I think often we don't, we look at a call and comment on quite granular things. As part of a strategy of sort of listening to these calls for not just in case something's wrong with the system, but how we might do some sort of continuous quality improvement. I think it would be good to look at some of those things, perhaps.
If I could just come back on that point, that's a really valid point, because we did talk about particularly the confirmation of demographics when one of the calls was transferred from a health advisor to a nurse advisor, and it was a warm transfer, and therefore it wasn't necessary to do anything other than introduce the mum. And that's something that Jill and I have taken away from the work we're going to look at. It's different when we're calling somebody back, but we think on a warm transfer you should be able to say, I have Mrs. Smith for you, phoning about Phoebe, whatever name.
Yeah, I think that, so I'd like to make 2 comments specifically on that. I think the Future Services Subcommittee needs particularly to take that efficiency question to heart, because we know that operating efficiency is going to be so key to the success of the future organisation. So I think it's appropriate that the subcommittee should focus on that. In relation to the demographics, I was very struck by that. I listened to 4 calls, and I think that, on average, 4 or 5 sets of details were rechecked by the clinician on a warm transfer. And that's obviously quite deeply culturally ingrained, and we need to think about how we can revisit that. So it is a very important item for the future organisation to be thinking about. Was there someone else? Okay, Peter, Tim, and then possibly Steve. I'm not sure.
I was happy to share a line with Louisa, so it was we were able to talk to each other about that, and I agree with everything she said. The only other thing I was going to add is not to do with the patient dimension, but the handovers often seem quite helpful and warm in themselves. We both spoke about that, didn't we? And that, I think, so there was an internal sort of thank you. I'll take. That'd be lovely. That'd be lovely. Taking the call on. I thought it was really nice and surprising in some ways.
Well, surprising given the pressure that our staff work under, and the fact that they do this for hours and hours and hours.
Respect between comrades, as it were, and it's very good.
Respect and support. Tim.
Just for fun, on the efficiency side, just to feed back from a visit again to Kendal, I met a nurse advisor there who's using Dragon Dictate to good effect, and I think that sort of technology has the potential to save time, particularly given the general typing skills of anyone in this room and elsewhere in the organisation.
Okay.
And sorry to that, but it was in action, I think, was exciting for me.
Now let me add one more thing. So on one of the fever calls, the mother was asked, can you take the temperature? And she said, no, the baby's very, very hot. I don't have the means to take a temperature. Now, having established that there was nothing seriously wrong, it would have, I think, potentially been an opportunity to say, you might like to get a thermometer, or you can get one at a chemist, or because that's a piece of added value which I don't think is built into our thinking necessarily. But I don't know, just a thought. Louisa's looking at me with scepticism.
Nice touch.
I think it's good.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. I'll move on then.
Are we allowed to use our initiative? We are.
Thank you. So the future services, I think, will have caught up with transitional subcommittee by the end of today, and then we will be looking with slightly different perspectives on probably different calls going forward, but so that we can get even greater coverage and use the board's time to greatest effect. Okay, I think that finishes most of our public members today. Is there any other business anyone else wants to raise? No? The next meeting of the board would be in January at 10:30 here at Lehman Street, so happy Christmas everyone who will be leaving us now. I think we will take 5 minutes and then we will reconvene in private session.